What's up, everybody? Welcome to Fantasy Sports Now. I want to talk to you today about MLB service time manipulation. It's something that's going around right now. It's happening with Seattle. It happens every year to our favorite prospects. Some of you might not know how that works, so I'm going to get into it, and I'm going to let you know how it works in the most simple, basic way you can, so you can start to understand what's actually happening here. If you haven't heard, the Mariners CEO came out with some statements about Jared Kelenic and Julio Rodriguez about when they'd come up. Then he went off into some tangent about paying interpreters money and how he didn't like that. It was all very untasteful, but what he did say about service time was actually fairly accurate, though the whole statements were not in good taste. So let's get into this because I want to show you exactly what we're talking about here, and I'm going to take you to our favorite, Excel. And so I'm going to use Kelenic exactly the way his contract sits. He had a signing bonus of $4.5 million. That's when you get drafted. And the goal for any prospect is to make it to free agency. When you become a free agent, you get paid a lot more money. Teams compete for you. You can sign with the same team, obviously, but the amount of money that gets spent on your services goes way up. And the way to become a free agent is you have to acquire 6 years of Major League Baseball service time. So one service year is like 172 games or something like that. It's basically playing an entire season of baseball in the major leagues. That's what acquires you 1 year of service. So you want to get 6 years of service so that you can become a free agent, so you can make some serious big bucks. So here we're going to look at Kelenic. This is without manipulating his contract, and this is with manipulating his contract. We're going to start with the no manipulation. This is obviously the one that the players prefer and the one that the owners do not prefer. So just really quick, 2018 to 2020, he was in the minor leagues essentially. Last year he was in the alternative site. He was on a contract renew, which essentially says that the owner can renew his current pay or give him a little bit of an increase. This is generally in line with what a minor league player of Kelenic's caliber would make. But you can see he didn't require any actual MLB service during any of this time that he spent in the minor leagues, because you only acquire service time when you actually go into the major leagues. So this is 2021. This is as if he was to start opening day, day one in left field for Seattle, like a lot of people think that he should. And this is where the CEO was right when he says that, oh, well, he's going to come up in April. I'll get into why he said that in a second. But so for Kelenic, he wants to come up immediately so that he can acquire MLB service. So he would still be on a contract renew. His pay would go up to the MLB minimum. And it actually doesn't really get any higher. It does a little bit, like maybe $50K here and there at most for his first 3 years. So when we talk about guys like Kelenic, if he comes up and he's the next Mike Trout, his second year he's not getting paid anything. I mean, comparatively to what he could in free agency. So the first 3 years he's on the contract renew, but if he comes up opening day, he required that 1 full year of service time, which is key. That is the key. Year 2, same exact thing. He's still on the contract renew, but he acquired a second year service. Same thing for year 3. After 3 full years of service time required, you go into this arbitration period for the next 3 years of your seasons at your current team. The way arbitration works is essentially you finally actually get some this is real money for any of us, obviously, but this is when you start getting paid more. It's not really what you're worth necessarily to the market, but you are getting paid more. So obviously you like to go to ARB and not have a contract renew. The way ARB works at a high level is Kelenic would submit a price that he thinks he's worth, and the team would also submit a price that they think he is worth to an arbiter. It's a guy that basically studies the statistics and the analytics and would then decide that, you know what, no, I agree with Kelenic. His price was $8 million, your price was $7.5 million. We think he's worth $8. He's going to make $8 this year. Teams can agree on a contract in those times, but that's not really important for this. Just know that that's kind of the basics of ARB works. The really important thing for this discussion, though, in the manipulation, is the fact that he earned another service time year, and he will continue to earn that service time for 6 straight years, as you can see, and then he becomes a free agent in 2027, where he can then go test the market or stay, or he'll get offers from everybody, not just his own team, and he can seriously start making some serious cash. So this is the ideal route that the players like. It's 6 years, I'm worth it right off the bat. So let's get into the manipulation. You can see that the minor league stuff is all the same. He did not acquire any service time, but once we get into 2021, this is where it gets interesting. So, where the CEO came out and said that, hey, he's not going to come up until late April or May or whatever it is, he's essentially alluding to this year right here. You can see that there's an extra year of renewal, and he won't become a free agent until 2028. Well, how does that happen? How does that work? So if you bring him up in April, he isn't allowed to, or he won't acquire a full year of MLB service time. So what that means is, as you go along the path here, he would only have, for this case, I just put half because it's easier math. His second year, he'd still be on the contract renew, but he'd only have 1.5 years. The third year, he wouldn't be at 3 at the end of the year, which would be right here. So he hasn't had 3 years of service, so he doesn't go into ARB yet. At some point over this season, he would, right in the middle of the season, he would go over the 3 years of MLB service time, but you don't go into an arbitration state until the season's over. So you wouldn't actually go into ARB until after this season. So by bringing him up in April, you've essentially bought an entire extra year before he goes into arbitration. So that's the manipulation is. I'm purposely holding you back even though I know you're worth it and I know you'd be better than who we have in left field right now. I'm purposely going to hold you back a few months so that I can basically have you an additional year before you become a free agent. The ARB years basically end up working the same way. So right here at 3.5 is when you would actually go into ARB and you'd start making the same similar money, but 4.5, 5.5, and then you would acquire your 6th year right in the middle of this season right here. So you'd be eligible to become a free agent after that year was over, which would be 2028. So owners obviously love this one because by just simply leaving my talent down for a month or two, I can gain an entire extra year at pretty darn cheap, and he won't become a free agent for an additional year. Player's goal, which is in direct conflict with what the player's goal is of becoming a free agent as fast as possible. A player will always want to become a free agent as fast as possible. The owner's always going to want to keep that player for as long as possible, for as cheap as possible. So this is where you have a direct conflict between players and owners, and this is one of those things that really needs to be changed. In basketball, LeBron James gets picked first overall, and that season he's up and he's playing and he's starting. These guys don't do that, so this is the rules that they all agreed on way back when. I think this is something that they're going to have to look into. There are things that do help a little bit. This mentions the Super 2. I say to make a comment, but just the Super 2 essentially would make this an additional ARB year, so you'd have 4 ARB years if Kelenic was good enough. Don't need to get into it too much, but that's how the owners are trying to manipulate the service time so that they can maintain their players for longer. And this is exactly what that CEO was talking about, and this is exactly why Kelenic doesn't like it, and this is why the owners do like it, is because they can keep their talent longer for cheaper. So that is the basic version of how the contracts work and how manipulation happens. This happened to Chris Bryant badly. He sued and he somehow lost because it was very obvious that they were holding him back, and they do this every year, and they always say, oh, well, he's only had a few AA at bats, so, they always try to justify why they should bring them up mid-year when they know full well that they're better than the left fielder that they're starting. Alright guys, if you like what you saw, I'd appreciate a sub, a comment, anything you got for me. Love you guys, have a good one.